For most of human history, we were not the rulers of the planet. We were a small and vulnerable species living in Africa, among predators stronger, faster, and better armed than us. We had no cities, no farms, no armies. Humans would spread across every continent, survive the Ice Age, build civilizations, and transform the entire planet. How did we do it across this series? We will follow that journey step by step, from our origins in Africa to the modern world. This is the story of humanity. Humans began in Africa with no maps, no roads, and no knowledge of the continents beyond the horizon. Yet their descendants crossed deserts, ice, and open seas. But how did humans spread across the entire world? Imagine a world in which every living human belonged to small communities on one continent. No cities existed. No roads crossed the land. Europe, Australia, and the Americas held no modern humans at all. Yet, within tens of thousands of years, one African species would reach almost every habitable region on Earth. Modern humans evolved in Africa, but Africa was never one single environment. It contained forests, savannas, deserts, mountains, lakes, and coasts. Populations moved within the continent for immense periods, adapting to changing rainfall, following animals, and exchanging tools, partners, and knowledge with neighboring groups. The people who eventually left Africa were not marching toward a known destination. They had no map of Asia or Europe, and no idea that other continents existed. Most movements were local decisions. Follow water, stay near food, avoid drought, escape conflict, or search for safer ground. Human expansion was therefore not one heroic migration. It was a slow sequence of advances, pauses, failures, and new beginnings. Groups split apart. Some settlements disappeared. Others remained for thousands of years before their descendants moved again. The global journey unfolded generation by generation. The first lesson is simple. Humans did not conquer the world because they knew where they were going. They spread because they could survive uncertainty, learn from one another, and carry useful knowledge into places no member of their group had seen before. Climate repeatedly changed the routes available to migrating populations. During wetter periods, parts of the Sahara supported grasslands, lakes, and animals. During drier periods, those same regions became formidable barriers. Human movement accelerated when corridors opened and slowed when deserts expanded again. Northeastern Africa and the Middle East formed a critical gateway. Sea levels, rainfall, and vegetation changed over time, creating several possible routes. Some people moved through the Sinai region. Others may have crossed near the southern Red Sea, when conditions made the journey less difficult. Moving did not always mean walking across empty wilderness. Families followed coastlines rich in shellfish and fish, traveled beside rivers, and returned to reliable water sources. Ecological knowledge mattered more than speed. A group that understood tides, seasons, and edible plants could survive where strangers could not. Population pressure may also have encouraged movement. When local resources declined or neighboring groups competed for the same territory, a few families could move beyond the familiar range. Small decisions like these, repeated for centuries, gradually carried people farther from their ancestral homes. The travelers carried surprisingly little. Stone tools, wooden spears, fire-making knowledge, containers, hides, and social relationships were more important than heavy possessions. Their greatest technology was collective memory, where water might be found, how animals behaved, and which materials could be turned into tools. From the Middle East, some populations moved east through southern Asia. The route offered warm climates, but enormous variety. Dry plateaus, monsoon forests, tropical coasts, and major rivers. Each new region demanded local knowledge that migrants had to build quickly or learn from people already nearby. Coastal routes may have been especially important because the sea provided a repeated set of resources. Shellfish, fish, and seabirds were not identical everywhere, but the basic skills could travel. Following shores also reduced the risk of becoming lost in a huge continental interior. Humans encountered other kinds of people across Eurasia, including Neanderthals and Denisovans. These groups were not monsters or primitive failures. They had survived demanding environments for hundreds of thousands of years, made tools, used fire, and possessed detailed knowledge of their landscapes. The population sometimes met and had children together. Genetic evidence shows that many people alive today carry ancestry from Neanderthals, Denisovans, or both. Human expansion was therefore not a simple replacement. It also involved contact, exchange, and biological mixing. Every meeting could transfer more than genes. A new tool shape, hunting method, or plant knowledge might spread between groups, even when they remained socially separate. Human history advanced not only through invention, but through borrowing ideas that already worked. Some migrants moved northwest into Europe, where winters were colder and seasonal shortages more severe. Neanderthals already occupied the region. Modern humans needed reliable fire, fitted clothing, shelters, and food storage to survive long periods when plants were scarce and hunting could fail. Humans encountered other kinds of people across Eurasia, including Neanderthals and Denisovans. These groups were not monsters or primitive failures. They had survived demanding environments for hundreds of thousands of years, made tools, used fire, and possessed detailed knowledge of their landscapes. Hunting large animals required planning and cooperation. A single hunter with a spear was vulnerable. Groups could drive animals toward traps, surround them, or target weak individuals. Success fed many people, but failure could leave an entire camp short of food. Standard text: hunting large animals required planning and cooperation. A single hunter with a spear was vulnerable. Groups could drive animals toward traps, surround them, or target weak individuals. Success fed many people, but failure could leave an entire camp short of food. People also used smaller animals, fish, roots, seeds, and stored foods. The popular image of humans surviving only through heroic mammoth hunts misses the flexibility that made them successful. The best strategy was rarely one spectacular kill. It was a broad and adaptable diet. Art, ornaments, and ritual appeared across many regions. These practices were not luxuries separate from survival. Shared symbols could strengthen identity, maintain alliances, and help people cooperate beyond one household. Culture allowed larger networks to survive harsh periods together. Reaching Australia required something different: crossing open water. Even when sea levels were lower, islands still separated mainland Asia from the Australian continent. People could see some islands from others, but at least part of the journey required entering water without certainty that land lay ahead. That crossing implies planning. Travelers needed water, food, tools, and enough people to form a viable community after arrival. Rafts, or simple boats, had to carry children and adults safely through currents and weather. The voyage was not accidental, drifting by one lost individual. When humans reached Australia, they entered ecosystems filled with unfamiliar animals. They learned new seasonal cycles, new plants, and new hunting patterns. Aboriginal Australians became part of one of the world's longest continuous cultural histories, adapting to deserts, tropical coasts, and forests. Fire was used deliberately to manage landscapes in many regions. Controlled burning could encourage fresh plant growth, improve hunting visibility, and reduce heavy fuel. Humans were no longer only adapting to environments. They were beginning to reshape them through accumulated ecological knowledge. The Australian crossing reveals a central truth about human expansion. language, and imagination allowed people to prepare for a place they had not yet reached. They could discuss danger, assign tasks, and act together on a future that existed only in their minds. People did not survive the North by becoming solitary superhunters. They survived through cooperation. Food was shared. Injured members could be supported. Knowledge passed between generations. A community that cared for children, elders, and skilled adults protected the information required to survive. During parts of the Ice Age, lower sea levels exposed Beringia, a broad region connecting Siberia and Alaska. It was not a narrow bridge, but a vast, cold grassland. Populations could live there for generations while moving slowly eastward. The timing and routes into the Americas remain subjects of research, but people reached the continents earlier than older textbooks once claimed. Some may have traveled along the Pacific coast, while later groups used interior routes when ice sheets opened passages. Over generations, population spread south into forests, plains, deserts, mountains, and tropical regions. The journey from Alaska to the far south of South America covered enormous distances, yet communities repeatedly adapted their tools, shelters, and food strategies to local conditions. The final major expansion reached the remote Pacific. These voyages occurred much later and used sophisticated sailing canoes, star knowledge, wave patterns, birds, and cloud formations. Navigators crossed distances that would frighten many modern sailors, even with instruments. Settlers carried plants, animals, tools, and social traditions because an island community could not depend on finding everything it needed. A successful voyage was therefore both navigation and planned colonization. The travelers were creating a complete society across the ocean. Human beings also reached high mountains, dry deserts, and Arctic coasts. In each place, survival depended on specialized knowledge built across generations. No single body type was perfect for the whole planet. Culture allowed one species to live in environments far beyond its original range. But adaptation came with losses. Small populations sometimes vanished after drought, disease, or resource collapse. Sea levels drowned old coastlines. Entire migration routes disappeared beneath water. The story we reconstruct is based on surviving genes, tools, and sites, not a complete record. By the time humans occupied nearly every habitable region, populations had been separated for long enough that some traits began to differ in average frequency. Sunlight, cold, altitude, diet, and chance would shape bodies in ways that became visible thousands of years later. Humans did not spread because they were stronger than every animal or better adapted to every climate. A naked person alone is vulnerable almost anywhere. Our advantage was the ability to share information, divide labor, and improve tools without every generation starting again from nothing. Language turned experience into collective memory. Someone who survived a drought could teach children where water remained. A skilled toolmaker could demonstrate a technique. A navigator could describe a route. Knowledge accumulated faster than biological evolution alone could provide. Social networks mattered beyond the local camp. Partnerships and exchanges between communities reduced the danger of one group losing everything. During scarcity, distant allies could provide food, partners, information, or access to another territory. Humans also changed behavior quickly. When animals disappeared, they used more plants or fish. When cold intensified, they improved clothing and shelters. Biological evolution takes generations, but cultural adaptation can begin with one observation and spread within a lifetime. Drought did not always drive people outward immediately. Families could first reduce group size, change seasonal routes, or strengthen ties with neighboring camps. Migration became likely when several solutions failed together. This made expansion episodic. Long periods of stability, followed by sudden movement when conditions crossed a threshold. Rivers acted as both roads and barriers. They concentrated animals, plants, and fresh water. But floods and seasonal changes could trap travelers. Groups that learned crossing points, canoe building, or flood cycles gained access to territories that others could not safely use. Stone itself shaped movement. High-quality tool stone occurred only in certain places. People carried valued material across long distances or exchanged it through networks. A distinctive stone found far from its source reveals that movement and contact extended beyond one local hunting territory. Cold also changed the daily schedule. Tasks had to be concentrated into periods of light and manageable weather. Fuel gathering, hide preparation, and food processing could not be postponed. A storm arriving before camp was ready created a crisis even when hunting had been successful. Population density remained low, which made social contact precious. A group could travel for weeks without meeting others. Seasonal gathering places allowed information, partners, and materials to circulate, preventing each small community from becoming isolated in both knowledge and ancestry. New arrivals did not encounter an untouched continent. Aboriginal Australians transformed landscapes through movement. Burning, harvesting, and cultural rules tied to particular places. Their survival depended on detailed local knowledge, developed and transmitted across immense spans of time. The first Americans entered landscapes containing animals that later vanished, including mammoths, mastodons, and giant ground sloths. Human hunting may have contributed to some extinctions, but rapid climate change also transformed habitats. The balance differed between species and regions. Island expansion repeatedly tested the minimum size of a viable community. Too few settlers risked losing skills, partners, or crops. Successful voyages, therefore, required social planning. Who traveled, what knowledge they carried, and how resources would be distributed after landing. Human expansion also spread diseases, parasites, and ecological impacts. People carried microbes, hunted new prey, and changed vegetation with fire. Global settlement was an extraordinary achievement, but it altered every ecosystem humans entered. Adaptation and environmental transformation happened together. That combination, cooperation, language, imagination, and cumulative culture turned a regional African primate into a global species. The journey did not end when people reached the last continent. It created the separated populations whose later adaptations would produce visible human diversity. This is the end of this first episode. Thank you for listening. The next episode is about how did humans survive Ice Age? Would be great to hear you around again.